Permit me to start this way. I remember watching The Lord of the Rings when I was a kid, and even as an adult. I understood and enjoyed the story, but at the same time, I didn't quite understand the relationship between some characters. You could tell there was a history between these characters by the way they communicated, but we don't really know much, especially if you didn't read the books. Now, I'm in no way condemning the movie. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorites of all time, it's evergreen, but just sharing how I felt. Like, I wish they explored Aragorn and Arwen's relationship a bit to show why their love is so strong. All I'm trying to say is that there were gaps in the story, and honestly, that's how I felt when I read Genesis in the Bible, especially from the very beginning of creation to the time of Noah. From Noah, everything kind of makes sense. But prior to that, it was heavily summarized, and we had questions with no way of being answered. And that's where the Book of Enoch comes in. It does a good job of filling in that gap, and beautifully too, answering almost all questions that we have. I already did a video on the Book of Enoch, but after asking you guys and reading the comments, you all suggested I do a deep dive into the Book of Enoch and explain it in obsessive detail. So here I am again, talking about the Book of Enoch and leaving nothing behind. This will be one of the most complete takes of the Book of Enoch that you'll ever find on the internet or on YouTube. So buckle down and let's begin. The Book of Enoch is the best example of a spin off literature. It has over 100 chapters and tens of thousands of words, and it's based on a figure in the Hebrew Bible called Enoch, who isn't mentioned much in the Bible. Personally, there are two characters in the Bible that I wish I knew much about, but I can't seem to find anything about them. One is the priest, Melchizedek, who is also talked about with reverence and is important both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the second is Enoch. These two characters are important, especially seeing as these two characters were very important to God and even to the fathers of old, but somehow we have nothing on them. Since this video is about Enoch, that's who I will focus on. But hey, if you are curious about Melchizedek and you want us to do a video on him, then let us know in the comments, and if we get enough requests, I'll have to make a video on him. Back to Enoch. In the book of Genesis, Enoch only shows up briefly in the genealogy of Adam. Through this genealogy, we can see Enoch is the father of Methuselah and many other children. And then the text just says that Enoch walked with God and then was gone because God took him. That's it. There must be more to this story than meets the eye. What does "because God took him" even mean? Well, early Jews and Christians were never happy with such vague Bible verses, which brings us to the Book of Enoch, which did so many wonders, explaining a lot of things. Early Christians loved this book so much that it's mentioned in the New Testament. In fact, the Book of Jude, which is the second to last book in the New Testament, quoted Enoch in chapter 1, verse 9. Even the Book of Hebrews talked about Enoch himself. But even though it was very popular among Jews and Christians in the past, not many people today know about the Book of Enoch. Why is it like that, and what happened that the book went into obscurity? What was written in the book that makes it controversial? And, most importantly, what does it really say? Now, first of all, there is more than one Book of Enoch, and remember this because it will be important later. There are many books of Enoch, but the term Book of Enoch is usually used to refer to the first one. But there is a second book, which probably dates back to the 1st century CE and is preserved in later manuscripts, written in the Church's Slavonic language. Finally, there is a third book, which was written in Hebrew and was kept alive by Rabbinic Judaism. So there are three books of Enoch that are sectioned into different chapters, and we will go through all of them today. Many different texts were pieced together to make the Book of Enoch. The first Book of Enoch is divided into 5 main sections, and the oldest parts of the text probably date back to the 4th or 3rd century BCE. Some manuscripts of the book were written in the Ethiopian language in the 15th or 16th century. Ethiopic, also called Ge'ez, is a Semitic language related to Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic. It is one of the most common languages spoken in Ethiopia today. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church uses Ethiopic for liturgies, similar to how Latin was used for Catholic liturgies or the Coptic language for Coptic Orthodox Christians. This shows that the Book of Enoch has been through a lot of changes since it was first written to when our most complete manuscripts were made. Now, don't yawn and skip forward. There's a reason I'm giving you guys a quick history lesson, as it will be important later in the video. Remember, this is a comprehensive video, so all details matter. So that's a quick rundown of the text. It was originally written in Amharic, but the most complete manuscripts are written in Ethiopian. The oldest parts of the text probably date back to the 4th century BCE, but there are also parts that were written a few hundred years later. Now that I have bored you with the cold, boring history details, let's get into what the first book says. The first book of Enoch is divided into 5 parts, which are 1. The Book of the Watchers, which covers the first book of Enoch, chapter 1 to 36. 2. The Book of Parables, which covers the first book of Enoch, chapter 37 to 71. 3. The Book of the Heavenly Luminaries, which you can find in the first book of Enoch, chapters 72 to 82. 4. The Book of Dream Visions, which is in the first book of Enoch, chapter 83 to 90. And lastly, 5. The Book of the Epistle of Enoch, from the first book of Enoch, chapter 91 through 108. So let's start from the beginning with the Book of Enoch starts with praises for God and how powerful he is. Then by chapter 2 to 5, he starts to dive into astronomy, talking about the orbits, the moon and sun, the seasons of summer and winter, and how they are set in order, until we finally get to the famous chapter 6, which is what made the Book of Enoch famous. In chapter 6, Enoch talks about how the angels looked down on earth and saw the beautiful daughters of men and lusted after them. They decided to leave their heavenly abode to come to earth to make these women their wives. These fallen angels were about 200. Now, they knew what they were doing was wrong. In such, wrong was an understatement. It was wrong on a cosmic scale. This was betraying everything you stand for, just for sex. I mean, that's bad enough, but with God involved, that's double bad. To avoid anyone snitching or having a sudden change of heart, the 200 angels decided to swear an oath and bind themselves to this oath that no one will back out and they must see to their plan becoming a reality. When they all agreed, they descended to earth in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Now, if you are an avid Christian, you would start to see similarities between this story and Genesis 6, verses 1. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, too, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Chapter 7 of Enoch also corresponds with verse 4 of Genesis 6. The thing about Genesis is that that was it. We didn't get a prequel of what happened, or why these sons of God would leave their abode and come to earth. It just ended as it started. But with the Book of Enoch, those gaps are filled. The unholy union between these two species brought forth an unholy offspring known as Nephilim, also known as giants. Some people speculate that this could very much be the era of Hercules and the Perseus of Greek mythology, as well as other heroes of other cultures, because even the Bible talks about heroes of old and men of renown. I mean, Zeus very much behaved like one of the leaders of the fallen angel, in the sense that he was always sleeping around with earthly women. And mind you, the division and border control enforcement we see today wasn't like that during this antediluvian age. Now, Nephilims like Hercules were the good ones or manageable ones. There were also the bad ones, which were giants, sirens, and all sorts of evil spirits. In such, the term evil spirit, according to the Book of Enoch, comes from the children of this unholy union. Both Enoch and Genesis talk about how the descent and birth of Nephilim brought about great lawlessness that was never seen before, which brought about the flood. Again, the story in the Bible is summarized, but in the Book of Enoch, it is explained in great detail. In chapter 8 of the Book of Enoch, we see what brought upon the lawlessness, and it was knowledge. The angels taught humans things that were forbidden, knowledge that we were not ready for as a race. Now, you might ask, how is that bad? Well, that's like giving a kid a gun and expecting he won't shoot the first thing he sees. I mean, Hiroshima comes to mind. Sure, humankind learned beautification, makeup, and heck, maybe even plastic surgery back then, thanks to forbidden knowledge taught to them by these fallen angels. But that brought about fornication and prostitution like never seen before. Sure, they learned how to make swords and knives, but that brought about warfare on the smallest of issues. And those who didn't learn this forbidden knowledge from these fallen angels perished. They were known as the righteous and innocent ones who were massacred by their fellow humans who were consumed with their power. By chapter 9 and 10, we see the archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, complaining to God about the lawlessness on earth and how many innocents were dying from it. God then decides to send a flood to cleanse the earth of all traces. He sends Uriel to Noah to instruct him on how to build the ark. He also lists the punishments for the fallen angels. Azazel, who is one of the leaders of the fallen angels, would be bound to eternal darkness, and his face covered for eternity, so he would never see a speckle of light again, while most of the angels would be thrown into a prison and also in an abyss of fire, bound with chains that can never be broken forever. Their children, aka the Nephilim, are also not spared, as they will be destroyed. By chapter 12 to 15, Enoch was sent by God to the fallen angels to tell them their sentences. When Enoch did that, the angels who were already in prison were sorry for their actions and asked Enoch to intercede for them and beg God for forgiveness for them. Enoch did do this, but God rejected their petition. The Watchers, the children of heaven. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you. Yea, your petition will not be granted unto you, and from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world, and that previously you shall have seen the destruction of your beloved sons, and ye shall have no pleasure in them, but they shall fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written. Then, in chapter 17 to 36, Enoch is basically given a tour of what the universe looks like. I think he also got a description of what hell looks like, which makes it the only book to vividly describe hell. He saw things I don't even know how to put in words, but reading it leaves you in awe. The only time I ever got such a feeling was when I read the book of Revelation. And with that, that's how the famous book of Watcher ends. Next is the book of parables. The Book of Parables, which is now the first book of Enoch 37 to 71, is the second most important part of the Book of Enoch. There are two main ideas that run through the Book of Parables. The first is an account of a person called the Son of Man, the elect one, the Messiah, or the righteous one. This person is divine and has always existed with God. This figure has been hidden from everlasting and revealed only to the elect, indicating Israel, or more likely, the faithful within Israel. This leads to the second major theme, which is the coming of this figure among men, which will culminate with his enthronement on the throne of the Most High, the resurrection of the dead, the judgment of the heavens and the earth, and the initiation of the age to come. This already sounds like the book of Revelations, despite it existing way before the events of the New Testament were written. The beginning of chapter 38 is an introduction that talks about what will happen at the end of the world. For starters, all the kings and powerful people in the world will die. Second, the bad people who turned away from the Lord of Spirits will be wiped off the face of the earth. They will have nowhere to hide. Then Enoch had a vision after being taken to heaven in a whirlwind. Between the thrones of the Lord of Spirits and Enoch, he sees 1,000,000, 1,000, 10,000 people who never sleep, i.e., are immortal, thanking God all the time, which kind of resembles what was said in Revelation 5, verse 11. Then, chapter 46 talks about a scene that is similar to Daniel 7. Enoch sees the Ancient of Days and another being that looks like a son of man with him. The angel that acts as a guide for Enoch tells him that the Son of Man is the same as the elect one and the righteous one that he saw before. The rest of the second story talks about what bad people do. Angels of punishment are shown setting up a burning gorge or pit with chains and scourges of punishment. However, when Enoch asks, he is told that this lake of fire is not being prepared for the sinners who live on earth. Instead, it is for Azazel and the evil spiritual forces that rule the earth. In the last short parable, Enoch talks about what he thinks will happen to the good people after the judgment, when they will no longer be harmed by evil spirits or the sinners who serve them. Their life is called eternal, not just in the sense that it never ends, but in a way that makes time impossible to measure. Now, if you notice, when I was mentioning some parts of Enoch, I was also showing some parts in the Canon Bible that correspond with the Book of Enoch. Keep that in mind too, because it's important when we discuss why the Book of Enoch was banned. Next, we have the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. Enoch shares knowledge about the movements of the heavenly bodies, which describes astronomy and its connection to the divine order. It also goes into detail about a solar calendar, different from the lunar calendar used by the Hebrews at the time. These chapters laid out the foundations of the Enochic calendar. This could be how we ultimately made a solar calendar with its 364 days. Almost like today's calendar, the Enochic calendar is split into 4 quarters, each with 3 30-day months and 1 day in between each quarter. At the end of the Book of Luminaries, Enoch gives Methuselah the books that record his dreams so that they will be kept forever. This is probably a connecting tissue that will be used to join the Book of Luminaries' contents to the rest of the story. Then, we have the Book of Dream Visions. In this portion, Enoch has 2 visions. The first is about the Great Flood, yeah, that flood, and the second is about the history of Israel, symbolically represented by animals. These visions recount the world's history from the time of Adam to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. But first, the flood. When Enoch sees the coming flood in a dream, he tells his grandfather Mahalalel about it. The vision is about the coming flood in the world of the story. Once again, the story goes further than Genesis 7, painting a picture of cosmic collapse and annihilation. I saw in a vision the sky being hurled down and snatched and falling upon the earth. When it fell upon the earth, I saw the earth being swallowed up into the great abyss, the mountains being suspended upon mountains, the hills sinking down upon the hills, and tall trees being uprooted and thrown and sinking into the deep abyss.